I'll keep this brief. Today's episode is all about attention span. Whether you are a hobbyist, weekend warrior, making commissions for friends and family, or already a full-time maker, if you are solo in your shop, this is the show for you. I'm Ronald Lowe's, the host of Solo in the Shop, a woodworking podcast discussing everything from current projects, tools and techniques, decisions around running a small business, and much more. So if you frequently find yourself alone and covered in sawdust, follow my journey and we can be solo in the shop together. It's a rainy day in New Hampshire, and I should be in the shop, but I got distracted recording a podcast. Welcome, friends. It's interesting to me that over the course of days and even weeks, I frequently notice themes that recur, things that just happen or things that come up in conversation that reinforce an idea that keeps coming up, seems to be an issue with lots of people, or keeps recurring in my own life, in my own experience, in my work, and what I'm doing day to day. And that today is attention span and how it impacts our productivity, our sales, and our feelings about ourselves. In researching this, I've referenced a couple books. One is Attention Span by Gloria Mark, and the other one is The 3-Minute Rule by Brant Pinvidich. Both of these address attention span, but in different ways. So the first thing that I want to talk about is finishing projects. And as a solo woodworker, I constantly have a pile of tasks, a pile of projects, a whiteboard full of notes, notebooks full of the steps to complete for each of the projects. Now, each day, I probably try to fool myself into how many things I can tick off on these lists. But the reality is that once I get going, I focus on something, I get distracted, I spend time on something else. It takes me a while to recover. Maybe I do, maybe I don't. Maybe I don't feel like getting back to it. But either way, I don't check off as many things as I would like. At the end of that, let's say a day or a week later, what I wanted to finish isn't done, and I have this feeling of disappointment. Disappointment that I didn't finish, that I didn't maximize my effort, that I'm not delivering a finished product to a customer and getting a payment. And I kind of beat myself up about that. But the reality is that there's a lot of distractions, both internally and externally, that are conspiring against us. And it does take a certain amount of discipline to stay focused, but it also takes perhaps more discipline to get distracted and then pull yourself out of that distraction and get back to what you were working on. In the book Attention Span by Gloria Mark, she makes the observation that it used to be that people would spend about 2.5 minutes to 3 minutes per task. When it's internet work, looking at websites or apps, it was 2.5 minutes. When it's just physical labor, it was closer to 3 minutes. But after such a short amount of time, distractions happened. Whether it was an internal distraction, you've just realized that you wanted to check your stock portfolio, or you wanted to check your bank account balance, or you want to get onto Google and research what was that Brad Pitt movie with Claire Forlani. It was Meet Joe Black, in case you were wondering. And then there's also external distractions that are happening. You know, your phone is a big one, right? It dings, it vibrates. Something happens that literally is an irresistible pull that forces you to look at your phone, and it just takes a while to recover from that. The book also goes on to talk about the essentially 3 different kinds of mental states. There's a rote state, which is where you're engrossed in some activity, but it's not very challenging. There's the bored state, where both you're not engrossed in what you're doing and you're not challenged by it. That's just boredom. And then there's the focus state, where you're engrossed in the actual work and it's challenging. You're kind of focused and frustrated, right? If it's too challenging, you definitely get into frustration. But that's kind of the working part, right? That's when you're solving a problem. And I know for me, most of what I'm doing in the workshop is fixing problems, solving problems, whether it's a problem I created or just joinery or structure, things like that. When you lose focus, it takes time to recover, and that is a time killer. On top of the different mental states, from rote activity to boredom to focused or frustrated, there's the idea of flow. And for people who are sitting at a desk doing spreadsheets or compiling numbers, maybe there's not a whole lot of opportunity for flow. But in the workshop, if you're making something, that's the perfect environment for flow. That's where your creative juices get going. You start building, you start solving problems, time disappears. Suddenly it's been 6 hours and everything is coming together and it feels great. Flow is amazing. And flow is definitely the state where projects take giant steps forward towards completion. A fantastic feeling. So how do you manage to get your attention and your focus back on the tasks that is your priority? So in the shop, you get distracted. How do you get distracted, but then get back to work? Multitasking, highly overrated. Very unlikely to increase productivity. You're much better off focusing on a task, getting it done. So how do you get back to it? And the idea is that there's a concept of soft determinism, which is a way to reclaim your own attention. And it takes a little bit of practice. It's kind of an exercise where periodically you need to be asking yourself, what am I gaining from what I am doing now? And also, how do I want to feel at the end of the day about how I spent my time today? And the trick is to force yourself to ask these maybe silly questions, but force yourself to ask yourself those questions throughout the day. And the more you do it, the more naturally it'll come, the more naturally it will occur to you, hey, I've gone down the TikTok rabbit hole. What am I gaining from this? Is this how I want to look back on my day and say, I watched 2 hours worth of TikTok videos? Or do I want to be able to, at the end of the day, say, I got this furniture project that I'm working on 30% complete, and it was a very productive, profitable day. I made great use of my time. So asking those questions are kind of how you get your attention back. There's also value in recognizing that there are naturally occurring times where your focus is peaking, and there are times when it is declining. For those of us who work during the day, which we'll say is the majority of us, 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. are kind of the usual times where you have peak focus. So knowing that, as you're building out your schedule for the day, take the most challenging things and pencil them in for either 11 a.m. or 3 p.m. and don't schedule other things at that time. We also know that there's kind of a lull in productivity and attention span around 1 p.m., undoubtedly related to kind of the time from how long you've been up to when you're eating and our normal eating cycle. So it's important not to really schedule difficult tasks around that time. Personally, I am a big fan of the idea of siestas. I wish it was something that would catch on in the US. It would be amazing to, have a lunch break and then say, okay, we're going to shut it all down for an hour and relax, maybe take a nap and not be judged for that. And then come back and jump on that 3 p.m. peak focus train and get stuff done. Anyway, those are some tips on getting your focus back and how to maximize your productivity with a little bit of self-discipline, self-awareness. I encourage you to think about all the projects you have that are somewhat finished. I'm guilty of that. I have things that have sat unfinished for days. I have things that have been unfinished for years. I've been working on a master closet for my house probably 2 years. It really is down to I need to build some cabinet doors to finish it. The drawers are done. The lower cabinets are done. Upper cabinets, they need doors. And I've even got some of the door frames done. They're just not filled and they're not ready to be installed. But I keep kind of putting it off. And someday I'm going to just say, today is the day. I'm going to focus on this. I'm going to force myself to get back to it. It's very easy on any given project to get started and convince myself it's time to take a break from this. So I'm hoping that just giving some thought to attention span and discipline will help get those tasks a little further along. I want to spend a few minutes and flip this whole conversation on its head and look at attention span from a whole different perspective. And that is the attention span that our customers have, the people that we are reaching out to try and get commissions, to, design a piece of furniture, to close sales. I think back to when I was a kid and Close Encounters of the Third Kind came out. I loved it, enraptured, one of my favorites of all time. Fast forward 30 years, and I tried to introduce that movie to my own kids, and they couldn't take it. They couldn't sit still. They couldn't absorb the character development that was happening on the screen at such a slow and methodical pace. They needed quicker cuts, quicker action. Things needed to move along. It needed to be clear. They needed the answers before the director wanted to give it up. I had to give up on introducing them to that classic, wonderful movie. It used to be that movies would change camera angles around every 16 seconds. Currently, camera angles change about every 8 seconds. And that reflects the audience shortened attention span. Whether it's the internet or phones, the current generation, the current population has such a short attention span that media has had to adjust. Ads are quicker cuts. Online ads are very short. All of this means that when you are pitching an idea to a business partner or a customer, we need to rethink what that looks like. Gone are the days of a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation. Everything has to be faster now. And a lot of these ideas I'm getting from the book, The 3-Minute Rule by Brant Pinvidich. And in it, he basically says you need to work with the premise that you have at most 3 minutes to make your case. Whether that's to a business partner or a customer, you have 3 minutes. So get rid of all the gimmicks, all the extra stuff, and get right down to it. And in the book, he says basically there's 4 points that you need to cover. And those are, what is it? What are you trying to sell? How does it work? Tell me what I need to know about how this will actually improve my life, how it will function, how will it work with my life? Are you sure? How confident are you in what you're selling? Is it the answer to the problem that you've tried to solve? And lastly is, can you do it? For me, when I'm selling furniture to a prospect, the main things I focus on have been what is it and can I do it? The what is it is essentially the design discussion. What kind of table or furniture is this person looking for? What do they want it to look like? What is their vision for that furniture in their space? How do they envision using it? Or if it's a table, how many people are they trying to seat? Will it be formal, casual, everyday use, infrequent use? Is it outdoor? Is it indoor? Is it for a restaurant where it's heavily used? All of these things are kind of the design questions of what is it? And I have several techniques that I like to use to facilitate getting that part of the conversation done very quickly, whether it's having a catalog of work that I've done to let them look through and say, do you like something like this? Or more frequently, I say, have you already been online pulling down pictures of things that you like? And is there something that you're kind of going for that we can base this conversation on? That's a huge time saver. So that's the what is it part. How does it work? Not as much of a concern when you're building furniture, but I can imagine cases where you're trying to build something and you need to explain how it functions. But your potential customer needs to understand that right off the bat, and it needs to be very quick. The can you do it part, I spend a lot of time on as a solo woodworker. And that's because they know that if they're going for furniture, they can go into a furniture store, see something, and have it delivered. They know that what they saw is what they're going to get. When they're designing with me, that table doesn't exist yet. So they need to have confidence that I can actually deliver what we've described. The best ways that I've found to do that are pointing them to my website, to my Instagram, where they can see my work and get some confidence around what my abilities are. They can see similar projects. So when you're selling, there's a chance that the decision maker isn't listening. You might be talking to one person and they actually need to relay that information to someone else. Having a short, concise pitch allows that person to become your advocate. If you've made a compelling argument and it's short, they can probably relay most of it accurately to someone else. That's not true if you've given a 20-minute dissertation on everything you know about extension tables and joinery. But if you have narrowed it down to, I can build the table that you're asking for, and I can use the furniture in your house as inspiration for the design, they can relay that information. So when you're making that pitch, focus on important and interesting ideas. If you're writing your pitch, just to practice, to rehearse, try to keep it in the 25 to 30 sentences. That's about how much time you have. So you want to maximize the impact of your pitch by focusing on exactly the message that you want to get across. And these are all things that need to be practiced so that you can pitch quickly, knowing that your customer's attention span is very short. That's all I have for you this week. A little discussion about attention span, both for yourself in the shop and attention span when it comes to dealing with your customers and business partners. Gone are the days of long, drawn-out business conversations, and welcome to the age of very short attention spans. My guess, they're just going to get shorter, so we might as well get on board. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you got value from it and would like to help the show grow, I'd appreciate a review wherever you listen. Be sure to check the show notes for links to my socials or any extra stuff we discussed today. Until next time, stay safe in your shop, and we'll talk again soon.